verse 46, where it says that Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I wanted to point that out because, again, I think that as Christians, we are so conditioned to believe that victories are going to be instantaneous. And that's because when we read scripture, in one verse, we read about the pit, right? So verses 38 and 39, we're talking about Joseph being in this place of suffering and being in the pit. And so then we get to like chapters 41 and 42, where now Joseph is experiencing this victory. So from one chapter to another, we see these turnarounds. And so as Christians, we can get, I think we can get, we believe that it's going to happen quickly for us. And so it's important to extrapolate these details where it says that it took 2 years, that 2 years later, that Pharaoh had a dream. We need to point out details where it says Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, because those details bring us back to the center of this truth that we have to be willing to be okay with waiting on the Lord. Because when we're not okay with waiting on the Lord, what ends up happening is that we create our own plans for survival. We create our own plans for our own victories, and it never works out the way that we thought it would, because when we do things in our own strength and in our own wisdom, it actually ends up screwing us over in the long run. But because God is outside of time and he is infinite and wise, meaning he can see the beginning and the end all at the same time, he already knows what needs to happen so that you can live the life that he's called you to live, and live it in joy and in fulfillment. But those things cannot come unless you wait on the Lord. But we get so caught up with our flesh and our fleshly ways of thinking that we don't wait on the Lord like he would like us to. And that always brings us a lot of heartache. And so I want to just remind you today that whatever it is that the Lord is doing, and if you feel, specifically if you're feeling like God is not moving quick enough, you have to understand that God is working things out for your good, and that God is really so purposeful. Because think about Joseph. Like, we know that what he went through was very painful, but God knew what he was doing, because had Joseph not been where he was at the time that he was at, this famine could have destroyed everybody, including his family. But because Joseph was a man who God was with him, and Joseph was a man that continued to trust God even in the midst of the suffering, at the right time, God put him in a place and he gave him this plan